Congrats on getting beyond 1 million. What got you here won't always get you there. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to reach beyond their 7-figure business and scale to 8, 9, and even 10 figures. I'm Brad Weimert, and as the founder of EasyPay Direct, I have had the privilege to work with more than 30,000 businesses, allowing me to see the data behind what some of the most successful companies on the planet are doing differently. Join me each week as I dig in with experts in sales, marketing, operations, technology, and wealth building. And you'll learn some of the specific tools, tactics, and strategies that are working today in those multi-million, 8, 9, and 10-figure businesses. Life can get exciting beyond 1 million. Ryan Niddel, I appreciate you carving out some time today, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So I want to start by digging into kind of origin story and then get to present day business, which is a $100+ million. I'm going to call it a supplement company. And you might correct that.
Well, it's in the fray, right? It's a gray market product that I look forward to discussing here. So absolutely.
I love it, which I happen to know quite a bit about. So EasyPay Direct spends a lot of time processing payments for the supplement space and specifically things like CBD, Kratom, et cetera. So I know a ton about it. I'm excited to dig in. But before we do that, can you tell me kind of how you started in business and just the backdrop?
For sure. So Brad, it was, I'll say really, really early, grew up middle class. I grew up in, the 90s where I wanted Tommy Hilfiger cologne and I wanted a new pair of Jordans on my feet. My parents didn't have, a surplus of capital sitting around and said, I think you're absolutely nuts for buying, I think back then, a $60 bottle of cologne and a $120 pair of shoes. So if you want them, go out and earn it. And I was, 10 or 11 years old, went around the neighborhood, handing out flyers to mow people's yards and got, in my recollection, 7 or 10 homes that I can mow their lawn every week. It was a flat $10 a piece. And so I think I'm independently wealthy, right? As a 10 or 11 year old, I'm able to buy anything that I want to. Right?
Yes.
So that's really where it started, kind of the thought process. I would call it almost a forced entrepreneur, right? It wasn't a traditional level of training or experience. And then as more professional, right? As life takes its twists and turns, studying mechanical engineering, math and science came pretty simply to me, but knew pretty quickly didn't want to be an engineer, right? Sitting behind a computer wasn't exciting to me. So jumped into sales and got into the ultra illustrious world of automotive sales, right? I was a used car salesman in a small town in Ohio for a period of time. And I think anybody that wants to me, the best salespeople I've ever met were car salespeople at one point or another, right? Because you get that belly to belly conversion. You gotta know how to read people. If you're good, you have to be ethical and honest and all the things that should be prerequisites for any sales professional. But not that it always is that way. And ended up leveraging that and really stepping into my first entrepreneurial journey as an affiliate manager for a web hosting company, right? Where I think it's probably where some of our mutual connections come from. It was a startup company out of Akron, Ohio. And right, we offered a web hosting upsell on the back end of a make money at home opportunity, right? It was something that back then wasn't something that was widely done. It was before web builders were really prevalent. And so we created a really unique value proposition that as a affiliate manager, we had about 10,000 clients. I eventually took over as CEO and we sold it to a subsidiary of GoDaddy and we had about 600,000 clients in 2 years. So tons of
crazy
growth, all types of things that I've heard.
What time frame was that?
So it would be at this point 12 years ago. So it was 12 years ago to 10 years ago. So gosh, doing
2010-ish.
Yeah, 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there.
Yeah, in the world of technology, the time frame is super relevant to try to anchor it in what was going on, right? For those that remember.
Yes. And such a great way to say it, right? It was, it was almost prior to Facebook ads back then, right? Like we drove traffic. It was right when Google had just switched over where you couldn't do the traditional placements where you could do Google AdWords and make a bunch of money for doing nothing essentially, right? They had just switched. And so we grew this through affiliate means only. And had a lot of success with that. And that introduced me to what it meant to be a small market, small business owner. And simultaneously, Brad taught me all the things I didn't know at that point about finance and accounting, right? We were signing up people at a 3-year web hosting package, taking all the cash up front and doing nothing to do any sort of deferred revenue comp, deferred sales comp. So I think we're going to sell this company. I'm thinking I'm 29. I'm done, right? I've hit pay dirt because in my mind, we're doing 40 or 50 million a year in revenue. But you really start shaking it out. And on an accrual basis, we're doing 12 million, 14 million. And our expense structure is way out of whack for that sort of business overall. Like we're just, It's a really ugly exit versus the massive, I'm done. I'm retired at 29. I'm looking at back then an 8x multiple of EBITDA, and my EBITDA number was certainly not in actual reality, right? It was really humorous when it came down to it.
Can you break that down a little bit further for other people? Because I think what you just said is super, super, super important for entrepreneurs at almost every level of scale. The first point being, it's very easy to be delusional. And as an entrepreneur, when nobody says no to you in your team, right? When nobody's calling your bullshit, when somebody does, or when somebody asks you a tough question in your peer group, that should be your flag to think, oh shit, maybe I don't know the whole story. Maybe I need to dig in myself. So can you break down what EBITDA looked like in that company and kind of what that math was?
I can, Brad. So we had grown exponentially very quickly, right? And exponential growth on one side is great, especially when, again, you're selling a 3 to 5 year web hosting package, right? So we're collecting $200 to $400 instantly. But in that, we're seeing the cash at our bank account, and we're building a expense structure kind of around the cash basis, but we're not planning what it looks like to service that customer over the next 3 to 5 years, right? So the money's coming in, the money's going out, and we're living, high off the hog. My partners and I, we're growing this business very rapidly. We're sitting there, and in my mind, we're running I'll call it a 50% net income margin, right? Because we built out the servers, we built out the infrastructure. We started to leverage international support 24/7, right? India and the Philippines. So support was not expensive, but not inexpensive either at scale. And so we're sitting there looking that, gosh, our revenue went from, I'll say year one was a partial year. I'll make it up, Brad. I certainly don't have this committed to memory, but let's say it was 5 million in the first year. The next year's, 40 million. And then the year after that started to trend down, right? When we went to market. So we were maybe pacing for 25 million. Competition came into the marketplace. We had no moat or unique value proposition. And so all of a sudden we're starting to peel back a little bit on expenses, but we had kept all of our books on a cash basis, right? At best. And I can't even say we really kept the books. We had a very fractionalized accounting department, right? We didn't have anybody with a level of, I'll call it traditional training. We had someone that says, oh yeah, I can run spreadsheets. I'll figure out QuickBooks. I can make sure all the bills get paid. And we put that individual in the seat. And she did a great job for the skill set that she had. But we didn't really go to market and find a traditional controller, traditional CFO. It was like, that's the land of forgotten toys. Like, we don't need accounting people to tell us anything. Huge mistake there across the board. Right? I look now as I look at business, every business that I've been a partner in or owned or sold, accounting and finance end up being a profit center into themselves if structured the right way. Like, it's that hidden profit multiplier to me in every business when you get the right staff. But didn't do that back then. And so as we're starting to consider exiting, right, partners and I want to move on to different things. I don't say we didn't see eye to eye, but right, we started to see the kind of the writing on the wall. We didn't want to continue to fight the good fight anymore. And certainly realized that as revenue was decreasing, the multiple was going to decrease. But as we start going to market, right, and exploring what it looks like, we start realizing really quickly that we don't have data rooms built. We don't have our financials in order. We haven't had anything audited before. We haven't done a quality of earnings statement that can be tied out. Like, it's really, really rough. So we pause and say, okay, let's bring in some external help. Let's rebuild the books. Let's recategorize things, and let's go back in time to switch from that cash basis to an accrual basis. Let's play the game the right way. And as we do that, when you really look at how our expense structure was built and our OPEX, right, our operational expenses were really high, right? Our rent factor was really high. Some things were going on that certainly you couldn't take out on the books long enough. We didn't own our facility. It was all rent. And so all of a sudden, I'm going to market thinking I have a $35 or $40 million a year business running at a 20 million in EBITDA. And by the time everything's recategorized and restructured, I'm really running about a $14 million a year business at about a $3 million EBITDA, give or take, plus or minus. Now, because the outward appearance and the ego was this fact of we're doing so well, we've got everything figured out. We've this massively successful company, and we're playing into that in peer groups, in social settings, in the way that we're traveling, the way that we're partying. Like, as far as the outside world knew, we had our shit together. Like, we were the 800-pound gorillas. Like, nobody knew that we didn't know what we were doing at that level. Like, it in peer, again, mastermind groups you and I are probably have been a part of or are currently a part of, all these different conversations. People are looking to us for marketing tips, for direct response tips, for customer support tips, because fuck, we're were huge. Like, we got to have it all figured out. Nobody is talking about finance and accounting. Nobody is bringing this up at all. And so then, we go to market and it's like, okay, we did the cardinal sin and told people we were going to sell. Right. So now you almost can't back off that ledge in my experience. Right. The worst thing you can do is when you want to sell your business is you get that LOI and you tell somebody you've sold it, because it puts you in this corner that's not real. Right. Of course, we knew an LOI wasn't legally binding, but in our minds, we're already starting to cash the check. Mm-hmm. Well, you go through that diligence process with a buyer, and whatever we thought we had figured out, they proved to us how little we really knew. And so now all of a sudden, this company that I thought was going to sell for $300 or $400 million sold for 12. 12 million is not a bad number, right? I'm by no means casting dispersions on a $12 million exit, but this whole categorization of all these things that go on, I'm 27 to 29 years old, and I'm sitting there like, okay, well, the first one's out of the, my first exit's done. So I'm convincing myself I have the Midas touch because I'm refusing to actually look at the facts of what happened. Like, I'm going to go start another business. I'm a master at this. I got all this figured out. And I'm a slow learner, Brad, so I didn't hire a good accounting group to help me. I had a great staff to support me, but started a merchant processing business, right, where I took a lot of the risk associated with that, and didn't have the right support staff. Didn't want them around. It wasn't even that I couldn't get them. It was just like, I just don't want to do that. And 18 months later, I'm writing a couple big checks to Visa and MasterCard for the chargebacks that come in and all the pieces and parts. And I'm shutting down my business, letting people go December 21st. All the money from my part of the exit was gone. Rental properties in foreclosure, car gets repossessed, like bottom of the bottom at 30. Like, I certainly had a good time at the web hosting company. And then I think my net worth was maybe negative 40 or negative 60 grand after failing at merchant processing, which
brutal.
You having a processing company, like, in theory, if you just do the basics consistently, and I'm not oversimplifying a business that's inherently not simple, but like, it's just slow and steady and do the right thing consistently and watch the ratios and watch the numbers. And
yes,
I'm hyper simplifying things that are not that simple, but man, my ego didn't be doing any of that, Brad.
You hit it on the head right there. Your ego didn't have you doing it. And I think it's such a good lesson for so many people, because that initial experience of getting to 50 and 25 million and looking for a huge exit, and then getting the reality check of the numbers, but then also feeling like you had to sell because you had your ego wrapped up in it and you had this posture wrapped up in it. That's real for so many people. And it's, one of the most challenging quandaries inside entrepreneurship is that frequently it is the A-type people that are hard charging drivers that are the ones that execute effectively on the front end. Ego is tied into that personality type, right? Humility is typically not tied to that personality type. So it's something that we have to learn. And I would be remiss to not highlight what you said about merchant processing, because the number of conversations that I have with entrepreneurs that are like, well, I don't get it. Why is the processor holding my money? Or I don't get it. Why did the processor close my account? We're just selling stuff. And they don't understand the risk associated to processing. And so if you don't manage that effectively, then you as a processor end up paying the chargebacks yourself, right? And it closes your company. So it's obviously very close to my heart. And we spend a lot of time, looking at stats, data, chargebacks, yada, yada. But it's such a good lesson for people. So merchant processing didn't work out for you, but largely because you weren't paying attention the right way is what you said functionally.
Yeah, functionally. So it wasn't, I didn't learn the lesson from not having the right accounting staff. I had great, I'll say, entry-level employees, the block and tackle stuff. But when I got to a C-suite or director level, right, I looked at, I want to put more cash in my pocket than to pay staff that would have really long-term, it probably still would have been around. I mean, who knows, right? I don't know if it would have been a passion project for me or not, but it was greed as well. It was, okay, I just sold this company. I've told everybody I sold, and I want to be bigger than life. And so, well, gosh, I don't want to do that inside the company because I want to put more of the free cash flow in my own pocket, right? I don't want to have a support staff around that's going to be a big drag on payroll. Like, if I would have had anybody that had a level of financial acumen looking at any of the ratios, I would have caught this. It's not like it like appears one day and you can't see it. There's some really prevailing indicators that show up inside that business.
Okay, hold on. I got to ask you. So do you have, this is another thing that I see routinely with people that I know. First off, tons of people give you the top line number and their margin is shit. So they're like, yeah, we're doing $12 million a year and they're taking home 350 grand, right? Or whatever. The other side are people that have a potentially high margin business and then have to make the decision. What do you put back into the company and what do you take? Do you have any sort of framework or hard, fast rules about what an acceptable margin is to take off the table?
I do. And this comes from the experiences that I'm setting forth now, where I look at it, even in my compensation as a CEO, that compensation should be fair and reasonable for the market and the size of business. And so it's not so much of what can I take off, it's what could I be replaced for? And that I look at universally across the board, where when I start doing now financial projections, whether it's, forecast, budget cycles, things like that, of course, I want to pay attention to net income margin and build around that to a combination of top down and bottom up, right? It's that net margin plus, and it's the revenue down, and see how close those come together. But it's simultaneously, again, in that SMB space, that small market business, it's really common for me. It was back at the processing company. Right, I wanted to make a certain dollar amount. I was going to take everything to put that much money in my pocket instead of saying, hold on, processing company, we'll make up a number. I don't remember what it is. $10 million in annualized revenue. I use software that's called the Economic Research Institute now, where I can type in ECIS code to understand business verticals, size and scope of a company, number of employees, revenue, region. And it starts to show me pay bands based off experience, based off size and scope, based off projections. And so, okay, I don't care that I'm the founder. The CEO should be making X number of dollars. And then I can look and do quarterly distributions, quarterly dividends, semi-annual dividends or distributions, that I shouldn't be treating the business like a bank account. I should be treating it, as contradictory as this might be, I should treat it like a job for a moment. Because now I like to see, 4 to 6 months of operating capital and reserves at all times, at least a highly liquid type of reserve account, probably not in a true cash, but a cash equivalent. And I like to have a lot more stability. But that again is because I fell flat on my face. So I'm probably a little too far on that other side at this moment in time of saying, is that really an effective use of capital? Probably not. I could get more inventory turns and do things a lot more aggressively to make the company more valuable that I own now. But my peace of mind has such value to me of saying, look, if our revenue drops or something goes left or right or supply chain gets interrupted, man, I don't want to have to bat an eye, because there hasn't been a time in my professional career that I couldn't figure out in 4, 6, 8 weeks how to generate revenue again. Like there's always a way to bring more money in the front door. It's going to be those little momentary blips where if I'm running it too tight, I might be left out in the wind.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that I really like that delineation between the employee and the owner. And certainly in larger companies, that's impossible reality to extract from, right? You have a CEO, and then you have the ownership structure, and that's it. In smaller companies, it gets very easy to convolute everything, right? Particularly if you're the 100% owner, and if you have other companies that roll into your tax return, right? Then it's like, well, ultimately it ends up at the same place anyway. But how you run it doesn't have to be the same.
Well, correct. And I think so much of that also is determined upon what's the staff that's supporting you, right? So it's a little different for me if I'm a solopreneur versus, I've got a staff of 8, 10, 12 people, where it becomes my moral obligation, my fiduciary responsibility to watch out for those people, right? They're entrusting me to make certain that their bills are getting paid, and they have families and structures and things that I think they hold a lot of weight to me. There's a lot of gravitas behind those of saying, look, you've trusted me. There's a big world out there. You could work anywhere, and you've chosen to work here. I need to make certain that there's cash reserves. So the last thing you have to worry about is if you're going to get paid or not. And I still like the profit first type of methodology. I do believe as a founder, as a CEO, as an owner, we do have to pay ourselves first. I'm not looking to be the martyr and push ourselves way down. But if it comes down to, laughingly, can I fly first class on Delta versus charter a jet? If I fly first class on Delta, can I make sure my staff and we got capital in the bank versus needing to fly private because it's more convenient? I can not fly private for a while. That's going to be okay. I don't need that 30 grand expense versus a $2,500 round trip on Delta. I can be that inconvenienced, laughingly. But the ego right back then, it was a freaking challenge for me. And it wasn't an Instagram thing back then. It wasn't social. It was just like, this is just the life I'm accustomed to. Of course I'm going to keep doing this. I'll figure it out. It'll work itself out.
Are you going to fly coach though?
No. No. I will take a layover somewhere to fly Delta versus Southwest because of I think at a certain point you become accustomed to the space and the amenities and damn it, at some point we're worth it, aren't we?
I'm 100% with you there. I won't fly Southwest, period. And I will. There are at least other airlines that I'll take. I was a Delta whore for a long time. And now it's acceptable for me to fly American or United because I live in Austin. So I don't really have a choice. Sometimes I got to do it for the direct.
Yep.
But I will say I've gotten good at rationalizing this too, because you do have more space to functionally work in first, right? In coach, you're like crammed in trying to be I'm very uncomfortable by the end of the flight if I'm working the whole time in coach.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I go back to the web hosting days and I became CEO and my partner sat down and said, "Why do you keep flying coach?" I said, "Well, I can't rationalize the extra money." And Niddel said, "You have to stop that. Like legitimately, if you're 20% less productive at your destination because you're uncomfortable, because you had to wait, because of all these things, you're the one that's driving the revenue of the company. That 20% will extrapolate over a period of time as a large number. Like your comfort has to have a value to it." Like, okay, that's a way for me to internally justify or rationalize. Again, I'm a Midwest normal guy, right? Middle class upbringing. Like it was a big swing for a while to see $1,000 plane ticket. I'm like, oh gosh, I can fly coach for $250. I'm going to do that. You know, running a company that I think is doing $40 million a year and flying coach, because it was just, of course I would.
Yeah. Well, I think that is precisely the levers that you need to relearn as you scale through the different stages of business. And, you know, this is a fun example because it seems ridiculous, especially to people that are on either side of the coin, right? If somebody is totally clear on why they would do it, then they think it's ridiculous to fly coach. And if somebody grew up in the Midwest like we did, then they hear this and they're like, "The fuck are you talking about? Why would you ever spend more money on first class?" Especially once you go into international flights, et cetera. But the lessons cross all these different parameters of, you know, $500,000 business to $5 million business to 50 to 500, et cetera. So I think it's good to hit on them. So you web hosting company, merchant processing, negative 40 grand in net worth. Where'd we go from there?
That's a fun conversation. So we jumped into, of all things, custom clothing, right? Because the ego, I wanted to just jump back into sales. I'm like, shit, I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. I'm not as good as I thought I was. I can't go back and lick my wounds, because although I was running luxury car dealerships and had a really great track record in that industry, I was going to have to go back to my peers and say I failed at something. And they had looked at it like I kind of made it out almost. Okay, I'm not going to do that. And so what can I do in sales that's not digital based? I don't want to mess with the internet anymore. I'm burnt out. I'm not good at it. And so I learned, I call it the haberdashery, right? I learned how to measure for suits. I learned all about wool. I learned all this stuff that was not scalable at all, that I ended up making pseudo scalable, where living in Columbus, Ohio back then, still do now, I have found clients with social media in New York City and Chicago, in Salt Lake City, a couple in Texas. And I would travel around, right? I would drive, Brad, as again, I was in the hole. I would wake up in the morning, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, drive the 8 hours to New York City, measure people from noon until 5 or 6, take half down so I could pay to get their suits made, drive back as far as I could make it without falling asleep, pull off on the side of the road, sleep in a rest stop or a Wendy's or McDonald's, then drive the rest of the way home and work the next day. I did that for, 18 months, 2 years, somewhere in there. I got a little smarter with it. I reached out to some of my old developers from the hosting company, designed an app that I could take a picture of somebody's body, cross-reference that versus some variables, use that to then allow a customer to put in orders without me having to see them. Ended up taking that app, bringing it to a wool manufacturer out of England, saying, "Hey, I've got this app that works really well. I'll let you use the app, or I'll give you the app, but I want a small piece of equity in your business." He said, "Certainly," because he had the wool component. I had the digital component. Then ended up building my own company. I had 6 or 7 sales guys, sales professionals, men and women. And then just started looking around. I still have a wife and a daughter, and was just had gotten engaged. Like, man, I don't want to be on the road 90 to 100,000 miles a year. I don't want to keep doing this. So did an owner finance deal to my head of sales, and just, look, I'm going to step away. I don't want to continue to do this. I'm not passionate about it. It was great because it recalibrated a part of me that needed recalibrated, start to rebuild that belief, because my belief in myself and what I was good at was shot after the failure of really simultaneously the downside of the hosting company plus the failure of the merchant processing company. I just was convinced I was almost worthless when it really comes down to it. It's like I didn't have a value in the world. And so over the next 2 years, it really helped rebuild that. Then jumped into CBD in 16. Before, right, direct to consumer, like, screw it, I can figure this out. I'm seeing trends on what's going on the affiliate side. Banking was tough. Merchant processing was tough. It was before CBD is what it is now. I mean, you get it.
Yeah.
Like playing all the games, juggling ISOs and all types of crazy stuff we had to do back then. And grew the CBD company from nothing to it was $10 or $15 million a year in revenue. Just, again, direct to consumer, not a big box brand. And then sold that to a private equity group out of Pittsburgh that was heavily involved in the cannabis space. So when the green bill passed in December of 18, they had a checkbook ready to buy me out and take over the infrastructure, the marketing efforts, all those pieces and parts. So that they brought it into their fold and then took that company and sold it off. Gosh, I think it was 2 years ago. So then I jumped into consulting, of all things. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm not independently wealthy, but I can at least breathe for a second. And consulting led to really where I sit now. Brad, inside of a company called MIT45. I came in to consult with the two founders. They've been at it for 8 years. We're burnt out. Wanted to pull out of the business. Didn't want to sell it, but we're working 60, 70 hours. And we're kind of stuck at that $5 million a year annualized revenue place. I'd experienced stuff past that. And so I came in just to help with, I'll call it operational efficiency at some point, right? How do we just, question what we're doing and why we're doing it? Is it the best way for us to do what we're doing? Bring in some lean manufacturing ideas, bring in some Six Sigma ideas, some stuff that's, maybe not all that enjoyable for people, but it works pretty consistently. And as luck would have it, I take from consulting into fractional COO, into equity partner, and now CEO. And the two partners are kind of, rather than have much to do with the business, by their choice, by their design. It's like the process that we started in 2019 finally has come to fruition now. They have no daily, weekly, or monthly responsibility. So other than sit on the board and make sure that I'm consistently growing the business the right way, which took us to just under 70 million annualized revenue last year. We'll do just north of 100 million this year, assuming the trends stay on pace. And much like you said, I think it's important. It's not always fun to talk about this side, but the net income margins are still very, very, very healthy, right? We still run a 45, 44% net income margin on the business. So, right, just like you said, anybody can dump more money into marketing and tell everybody they got a $100 million year business that runs a 10% net income margin, and your company's really not worth shit at the end of the day. Like, Nobody wants that. Where we're building this specifically to be a sellable asset, and whether it's sellable from a public offering. We're starting to have some investment bankers out of Toronto poke around for an IPO, see if we're interested in going on that path, or a PE type of exit. We look to be one of the largest Kratom companies in the country to take that first big step into kind of the forefront of what things look like.
I love it. So I have 17 questions, but they're from a few different directions here. So at some point, I want to talk about these two founders and their path, because you've got this path that we've been outlining, the two founders getting out of the way of the business in order for it to grow and scale is super interesting. And I think that there are a lot of people that could learn from that. And also you hit on it where you said at some point with the clothing company, you just realized, I don't want to be doing this shit. Like, let me find somebody else to continue it and I can move away. So I want to talk about all those, but first, why did you get into CBD and then Kratom? Those are both very challenging spaces for lots of reasons. They're riddled with regulatory problems, brand perception issues, banking and processing issues. Though obviously CBD was like a hot topic for marketers. So what was it? And are you deliberately in this space where you're in these challenging supplement related spaces?
I wish I was that intentional or that intelligent to say, yes, I'm in this by design. The CBD was exactly what you said, right? I had friends in the affiliate world. Traffic was starting to ramp up. It was before everybody in the world was there. It was right after, right, what the acai berry and all that stuff had kind of started to shut down. So then you had this influx of traffic that was available to a new product. And I'm like, okay, I can figure this out in the short term. I can I can juggle some things. And originally it was just a cash grab. It was a traditional affiliate, no name brand. I started looking, I'm like, hey, this is really foolish to look at this way, because if you offer a good product and you offer good service, the money is really on I'll call it the rebill, but not in a forced continuity sense, not in a negative opt-in or any of those things that might happen, but in a true, if I do things the right way and I offer a good experience and I call and do an order confirmation, I'm not selling living daylights out of somebody, and I can get 20% of the people to reorder, which should be a pretty reasonable number, and they just reorder 2 additional times. This is a really profitable and successful business where I can kind of outspend people on the front side and without playing all the games that you have to play.
Let me summarize that, because if you're not in this little space, then people probably don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So if you're good at marketing, and specifically if you're an aggressive marketer, what I heard you say was, and you saw CBD, saw that it was a hot topic. So, hey, I'm going to jump on this trend and capitalize on it. And you could be selling anything or marketing anything, but this was a hot thing to market. Let me just grab some of the traffic that people are already searching, right?
Correct. Spot on.
Got it. So then the other part is, you said the money is in the rebill. And functionally, that means that, and you delineated between these two ideas, but that means that it should mean that if you have a very good product, people are going to continue to buy it. And all of the bulk of the profit comes from them continuing to rebuy it or get a rebill. The problem in aggressive marketing is it's very common for people to have a shitty product and say, hey, you can try this for 7 days for free, just pay $7 for shipping. And then they're going to automatically rebill you $100 a month until you figure it out. And they're going to make it difficult to cancel it. And that, unfortunately, was a very common practice. And the FTC has gotten involved, and so have Visa and MasterCard, to make that more difficult to do. But for business owners, there is a happy medium somewhere in between these two. And depending on who you are as a business owner or what your skill set is, you get to pick where you land there, right? You get to crank that dial up to aggressive marketing or not. But I like where your head was, which was the product. If it's really, really good, people are going to keep buying it, and that's where the margin is.
Well, yeah, Brad, and I'll summarize it in I think a more globally acceptable way. When you focus on lifetime customer value, right, your LTV, and you cross-reference LTV versus the cost of an acquisition of a customer, there's a ratio there that exists. And if you pay attention to those two numbers consistently, and I don't care what business you're in, it's costing you something to get a customer, and that customer is worth so much over a period of time, then you back out your cost to fulfill whatever your product, good, or service is. The magic is actually found in that ratio, because if the ratio is healthy enough, on the front side, I can outspend my competition to get access to that customer, to then carry that customer on my books until they become ultimately profitable. In my experience, the only way you can really do that is at least a good product. It doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be world class. It just can't be shitty. Really, really incredible customer experience, doing the right thing every time, and making certain that you're not abusing a customer, right? Putting yourself in the customer's chairs for a second, because right in that old world with direct response marketing, it was really common that someone would buy a product, they'd instantly end up on a call center floor. That call center floor was trying to get you to buy anything else under the sun. The leads being passed around to a bunch of different people. The data is being passed around. Counterparts of mine weren't focused on the true customer experience against lifetime value. They thought lifetime was 30 days before the lead file was dead. And it was how hard and how much can we get out of this customer in 30 days before it goes away. And I know people that have been incredibly successful with that. They've made great amounts of money. But I think that's the difference between making a great amount of money and building a great brand, and building a great brand that has enterprise value. You can become wealthy both ways. I just think the longer term success and the true wealth is built more on the latter than the former.
I love that. I like that distinction a lot. And I also like the distinction of enterprise value or market value, which is what is the value that you could potentially sell for. And I was talking to, I've told this story before, but I was talking to a friend of mine that owns a enterprise level SaaS company in Silicon Valley area. And he referred to one of the sales as street value. He was like, yeah, so it's $100,000 contract value, but that's $1 million in street value. And it was interesting. And I had to back out of it because it was interesting to hear him say that, because in my bootstrap land by myself, I don't even think about that. But it's silly to not think about it, because if you're going to sell, that is the value that you're going to get. And so it's an interesting paradigm shift to look at that and also tie it to the brand and the value of the brand versus the transactional nature of milking a lead for everything you can get out of it.
Yes. Right. And having consulted for a handful of exits and had a handful of my own, and as well as acquisitions, at some point during that process, someone's going to start looking at those more granular details, right? What's your lifetime customer value? What's your churn rate, or how many of those customers are falling off? What's your brand reputation online? And so it's playing the long game. If you can get to the point where you're not back against the wall, playing the long game wins. But think of all the reasons why people can't play the long game. They bootstrap it. They go get VC cash. They're worried about breaking covenants. So now they're squeezing on both sides. The enterprise value is not increasing at the rate it needs to. Their cap table is getting diluted, so they're getting just crushed. This dream they've built, they look around, they own 5% of a really dumpster fire at this point because they've diluted themselves just to keep the business running. So now they're doing anything they can to figure out how to make it work. And you start taking your eye off the ball, right? There's so many different reasons in my experience that people can't play the longer game. And it's, I think one of the most vital things is, going from the 5 million to, I'll just say trending 100 million. We haven't been there so far, is the ability to look further and further out. Right? Me as the CEO right now, if I'm not 18, 24, 36 months ahead, and 90% of the time I'm focusing, I'm really doing a disservice to shareholder value. Right? We switch entities from LLC to C Corp, and we're really structured in ways to, we gave stock in our company to every employee, right? So it's really, the whole focus has shifted now for me from what are we doing today and tomorrow to how do I make certain that 24 months from now, shareholder value is 300% higher than it is now. What decisions would I make to make that a reality? Which is a whole different way to start to look at it. Like you said, the street value. But I have to acknowledge, when we were at 5 million a year, I knew that was something I should focus on, but there wasn't fucking time to do that yet. There weren't systems and processes. There weren't the right people. And it didn't matter how many books I was reading and how many podcasts I was listening to. My shit wasn't in line. Our company's shit wasn't in line to make that the reality. But it's okay. I kept looking at that as a North Star of, okay, how do we get there? How do we get there? And it really provided a lot of clarity for me.
Yeah, I like that. So when you came in, so CBD was luck of the draw. you were chasing the marketing money. Were you putting yourself out there as a consultant before you got into, is it MIT45?
Yes, it's MIT45, MIT, the number 4, the number 5. I was putting myself out there as a consultant, but not I feel like right now I hop on Facebook or Instagram and there's 16 ads for different people that say they're consultants, right? Which is fine.
It's a terrible time. It's a terrible time to figure out who's credible and who's not.
It is. And so for me, I was just, I created a podcast called 15 Minutes to Freedom that it's still out there, but I wasn't doing anything with it, where I just shared daily 15, 20-minute bites of information of all the stuff I'd done wrong, right? Failed businesses, bad business decisions, steroid use, infidelity, lies, like you name it, Brad, and it's all there. And what was really fascinating was that was actually getting me a fair amount of leads that I wasn't planning on being a consultant. I was, I think, 125 episodes in, and I finally said, hey, I don't know if you're paying any attention. I don't know if you're listening. I see the stats, but whatever those mean. But if there's something I've shared that you think I could help you with, here's my personal email address. And I woke up and there was 1,400 emails over the next 2 or 3 days of just people and there was all scopes of things that people wanted help with, right? I mean, I'd certainly covered a litany of information. It wasn't just based around business. It was fascinating. That through that is how I met my partners now in MIT45, was podcast into having a little, I call it men's retreat here in Columbus, where, right, it's 2 days of, think of like a SEAL fit or Kokoro. I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm not professing to be one. I'm not saying I ever went through that. I don't need chastised for this, but, essentially 48 hours of not sleeping and a lot of physical and mental torment, right? Maybe it was the sadistic side of me. And then 2 days of business and psychedelic use, right? The completely opposite side of that spectrum. And one of my partners now came to that event and wrapped up the event. There was no upsell associated with it. There wasn't some sort of, I wanted to experience this and create this container to see if I could do it. And we wrap up the event and he says, hey man, would you consider coaching me or consulting me inside my business? So I don't even know what the fuck your business is. He tries to explain it to me. I said, I don't have any clue what that is, but if you think I can add value, let's give it a shot for 90 days. That's how it started.
That was MIT45, huh?
That's MIT45. Unintentional, no funnel, no sales call center, no shit. I was still operating out of my old CBD office at that point, right? So the staff had transitioned and they let me, have a carve out office space as I was figuring out what was next.
Crazy. The CBD company and the Kratom company could have been very similar, or they could have been very different in terms of operational structure, et cetera. They're both categories where, Kratom less so, but supplements in general, where you could just white label somebody else's stuff and create a brand and go sell it. And it could be drop shipped from a facility. Somebody else could basically do the entire guts of the business and you could just market it. What were the differences in operational structure between the CBD company and the Kratom company, and why?
Really great question. So the CBD company was exactly what you shared. I found a contract manufacturer that manufactured gummies, tinctures, and pain creams in bulk. And I was able to put my own label on it. They would ship it to me and I'd handle fulfillment, right? So I had nothing to worry about as far as the manufacturing side of operations. I just had the fulfillment side of operations inside of MIT45. And the reason for that, it was quickest to market, right? It was low barrier to entry for me. I didn't have to source all the raws. I didn't have to worry about manufacturing. I could just take the marketing prowess and sales prowess and plug it in. And I didn't get to the maturity of the business to focus on, I'll say, downstream profitability, where over a period of time, I would have brought manufacturing in-house. I would have sourced better products. There would have been things because there would have been another maybe 10 or 15% net income margin pickup by doing that, I believe.
For CBD?
Yes, for CBD.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
As I look at Kratom, I came into that business and it was already established at the $5 million a year, and it had zero direct consumer revenue associated with it. 100% of the revenue is B2B, because merchant processing then there was zero chance for merchant processing in Kratom. You could, if you played a bunch of games, which they weren't willing to play. And
did you hear all the dots slowly connect in my head there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, wow, how did you do no direct to consumer? And then I was like, oh yeah, you had to.
There was no choice. And so we had
okay. So I have to highlight that too, because again, if you're not in this space, nobody knows what are you talking about. So both CBD and Kratom, while they were both legal, even federally, Visa and MasterCard took issue with being able to process, use credit cards to accept them. So no processing companies would allow you to sell CBD or Kratom. CBD went through this wild roller coaster from 2016 to probably 2021. And even now CBD has challenges, but wild roller coaster. And Kratom was on the absolute banned list for a very long time. And only recently is EasyPay Direct able to process Kratom. And still, there are only a couple banks that will do it. But so this company, as a result, and by the way, Kratom, we could process for Kratom in, I think, 2016, 2017, and then it went completely off the map. Weren't allowed to do it at all in accord to Visa, MasterCard. During that time, MIT45 was alive, and they must have shifted, or maybe they were just B2B in the first place, but they sold entirely through like convenience stores and head shops?
Exactly correct, right? Smoke shops, gas stations, convenience stores, and a national distribution chain. And what happened is we figured out an extraction process that allowed us to create an extract that had effects unlike anyone else, where the majority of the business at that point was powders and capsules, right? Just raw crushed leaf. So if you're unfamiliar with Kratom, you can't smoke it. It has a very low heat degradation point, so it's not super stable. It's a leaf that's regional to Southeast Asia, right? Thailand, Indonesia. It is actually in the coffee family as far as the actual genealogy of the leaf itself. And when you take small amounts of it, in theory, it can give you energy, it can give you a sense of euphoria, it gives you focus. Yeah, I think it's a really potentially healthy caffeine alternative. If you take large amounts of it, it's more of a sedative, a muscle relaxing type of effect. The downside, as you're listening to us have our conversation, is it works on the beta opioid receptors. But specifically, there is one alkaloid inside the Kratom leaf, which currently has 54 active alkaloids, There's one alkaloid called 7-hydroxy that has been shown to affect the B or beta kratom or beta opioid receptor. Difference is A receptor is heroin, Oxycontin, Percocet, all the hard drugs. The beta receptors are for Suboxone and methadone. They're the things that get you off of hardcore opioids. So there's one alkaloid inside the leaf that has been shown to potentially affect the beta receptors that we've taken the stance to filter that out of all of our product instead of add it to it, which is what our competitors do. So the industry standards say 2.5% of your product can have 7-hydroxy. Ours have 0.001% or less 7-hydroxy. We just don't want the headache. If it ends up being that it's addictive and habit forming, the leaf has so many other great benefits without that shit having to even worry about it. Let's just pull it out. And so we created a product literally called MIT45. You can't really see it. It won't focus. It doesn't matter. It's a gold bottle, MIT45, that we were the first to market. And all of a sudden, like clockwork, we go from 5 million to 14 million overnight. And so it's rapid growth. It's supply chain. It's the operational efficiencies, right? It's Lean Six Sigma. It's all the stuff that nobody wants to talk about. But in that space, it was vital. It was the point where my partners, right, Dalton, more the marketing side, the creative side, Brad, we say, how does he get out of the way? Man, he was just happy to be along for the ride. He didn't care at all. He's like, man, you're going to pay me to not come into the office? I'll do that. I'll go travel. I'll go do anything. That is awesome. Where Sean would have been in the CEO chair, and it was really challenging for him. His identity was wrapped into the business. He's a little more senior, right? He's Dalton's 40, now 44. Sean's 60. And Sean and I struggled for about a year to figure out, right, that role and responsibility until the point of he finally sat me down and said, look, at 20 million, Ryan, I stopped having any fucking clue how to run this business. I was white knuckling it. I didn't tell anybody this. You've helped get us from 20 to 50 to 70. And it feels like you know what you're doing. I said, well, to the best of my ability, right? I have to acknowledge that I don't know what I don't know, but, you know, masterminds, some YPO, right? The Young Presidents Organization. There's some things externally that I'm a part of that I've got this great group of resources that I'm never going to repeat my past. I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and say I have it all figured out. I'm going to consciously every week look for somebody to give me more breadcrumbs of their success. I'm going to find somebody that's asking me those questions of, you know, let's talk through your auditing process. When do you start your auditing process? How often are your financials audited? What level of auditing are you going through? Things that before I didn't have any idea to even consider. And so all these things keep stacking on top of each other where we get to early last year, Brad, I said, look, we can build a direct to consumer channel now. You get it. Merchant processing works now. Things are viable. We can turn this on, but our balance sheet's healthy enough. We should just go buy market share. Why don't we just buy a direct to consumer brand? Like it's that old conversation of build versus buy. And I think I believe at this point, it's almost foolish to grind it out as a startup unless you have a truly life-changing process or product. Go buy someone that's got some level of staff, some level of SOPs, and some level of revenue, because you're just quicker. You're just further down the road. Like, I'll take a cash flow positive entity that I can then massage and turn into something greater versus bootstrapping it on my own shoulders. Now, it's my preference. I'm not saying that is the way to go, but right, we're able to do that and play the acquisition arbitrage, right? Where we bought this direct to consumer brand for under 2 times multiple of EBITDA. And our current valuation is 14x EBITDA. And so it's
crazy.
Like, how many more times can we do that? Now, of course, it's no different than crypto or stocks, right? Nobody has wrote us a check for 14 times anything. So it's not a realized gain. It's not real in the world, which is learning that lesson from the web hosting space. It's like, this isn't real at all yet. The real is right in net income, the free cash flow. I can see that. That is real money and it has real value. And I at least know that we've set the market for 2 to 3x multiple of EBITDA. So at base level, I know an enterprise value for our organization.
Yeah, that's a really relevant, astute point, right? Until you realize that, no, it's not real. However, the enterprise value of a company in a given industry is set. And there's variance, right? There's a window there, but it is true. that a company doing 50 million, 60 million, 80 million with X margin is going to be valued at a higher multiple than a company doing 5 million with the same margin, right? Just at scale, you're going to get a better multiple. So I think both of those things are really good to highlight and are true, but I love that you pointed them out. So hold on. So you did buy your intro into direct to consumer and Kratom was by buying another brand?
It was.
And what did you add in gross revenue through doing that?
So we acquired it. They were on a $12 million a year annualized run rate. They were 2.5 years old. The great part about that is, right, we've been able to increase it to about a $16 million a year annualized run rate. We bought them at a 25% net income margin, and through consolidation and deeper buying power, they're instantly up at the 40% net income margin.
Amazing.
So the acquisition has paid for itself with the way the deal was structured, plus the increased revenue and increased net income, which is not normal, right? I have to acknowledge that as you and I are having a conversation. Like some of it's luck, some of it's who knows all the different reasons. Certainly, there's a level of focus and energy to it, but it's not common to be able to buy a business and have that sort of have those, in my opinion, have those chips fall in place the way they have. But nonetheless, it's been a very successful acquisition, and we're in the market right now having conversations with four other of our competitors to go through something comparable.
We should talk more about that.
Yeah,
definitely. I definitely can do some intros there. So did you change the formulation when you acquired this other brand, or did you let them keep selling what they were selling?
We left that brand completely intact. We let them sell exactly what they've been selling. You'll love this. They have a 92% month over month reorder rate from their customers. It's the most loyal group of people I've ever seen before. And it's just powders and capsules. There's nothing.
Wow.
There's unique that we have a little bit of unique process there, but inherently, it's just brand loyalty. It's customer experience. And the previous owners did an incredible job of maximizing that. And I think we've continued that.
Okay. What did you do differently as from when you came in, they went 5 to 20 and then 20 to 50. What changed in let's say the sales process through that journey? And by the way, bear in mind for anybody that missed this is all B2B at this point, right? You had not yet gotten into the direct to consumer. So you're just going out and soliciting, convenience stores, smoke shops, et cetera, to try to get the product placed there, right?
Correct. Absolutely. So I would say the B2B component, even up through last year, was, I'll call it 56 million, 57 million in just B2B, kind of that block and tackle, the unsexy business, the stuff that's not supposed to be scalable, right? Kind of when you look at it versus the direct consumer that we all are familiar with. And the things that would be different, Brad, would be we went from in 5 to 20 million. It's like we would essentially take anybody that would take us, right? We were just hungry for market share. And we had a pricing strategy, but it was really complicated, right? We had 8 different tiers that you could buy depending on your buying power and how many bottles of a product we thought you could sell. And this very complicated formula that I don't know that I could explain now, but it was what was there when I came on board, and we just kept running with it. And then as we got to 20 million, we started to enhance a level of business acumen, right? Not only with the support staff around us, but also we started looking at numbers, right? There was enough data to start seeing trends, to start understanding we don't need 8 price points, we need 4. And gosh, when we solicit a customer, we should probably spend time understanding what their hot buttons are and stop talking about what we think hot buttons are. We should probably understand what they care about. When what they care about is these little bottles on a shelf turn more profit than any other square inch in their store. And we can prove that now because we got Nielsen reports from some of our venues that we have throughput through. And so we could show mathematically we're the most profitable 6 square inches in a store. And then we started to do risk reversal, just like you do in direct to consumer, where, look, if you buy our product and it doesn't sell, we'll just take it back from you. You got 45 days. If it doesn't work, we know somebody else will buy it. And so simultaneously, we started to get really specific on who we do business with instead of allowing anybody to do business, because we started focusing on brand equity, right? And what I mean by that is price integrity across the board. Because in that wholesale world, I sell you a bottle of product for $10. In theory, you should turn around and sell it for $20. but I can't really control that. If you're a bad actor,
right?
You might sell to somebody else for 11 and they might sell for 14, and it just gets, chopped up across the board. And so we got really intentional with that. And then from, that's 40 up to 70, now it starts to become, larger key accounts. It starts to become, having to navigate credit terms. It has, cash flow management, where all this factors into the sales cycle of things you have to consider, of course. But it's internal processes with so much of it of just, what are we focused on? And are we focused on the right variable at this moment in time? Where, to me, it's the acknowledgement that every new season of business can require a different way to look at it and a different staff to support it. So often I find that the staff that gets us to here might not be the ones to get us to there, because they can't learn on the fly at the same pace. They're treading water trying to catch up. And so some of it's going to market and finding better and better talent in the executive seats. And then in the support staff, right? The director level of just, okay, it doesn't help to have me be the smartest guy in the room as a CEO. It's actually catastrophic for our business. Like we don't need that at all. I need the CFO to be able to outpace me in every capacity. Same thing with the chief revenue officer, the CMO. If I'm having the best ideas all the time, we are screwed legitimately. Like, I need to worry about capital allocation, culture, enterprise value, things that I don't say shouldn't, but the daily activities need to really be handled by the brilliant support staff, not support staff, right? The executive staff.
That makes a lot of sense. And you need capital to get those people.
You do. Unfortunately, we're in a good spot where we have a little. It's worked out well for us.
Well, I know we're coming up on time, but from that perspective, I have a lot of other questions, but from that perspective, when you got to that point, were you looking for the C-level execs that had, how close to the role you had did their background and experience need to be? Were you looking for somebody that had done exactly what you were trying to do, or how do you approach that hire?
I approach those hires now with an 80% fit or better. I could care less if they've been in the Kratom space or the alternative space. They don't have to be in CBD or marijuana or any of those obscure markets. What I care is that they've been through evolutions in their career of rapid growth companies, and that they've been further down the revenue and further down the personnel side, right? Because to me, at some level, business becomes just business, right? Like, certainly there's nuance to Kratom and the regulatory oversight, but at some point, it's people, processes, and technology that are growing a business. And the thing that you're selling is just the thing, right? Our team is built in such a way that if Kratom became, a Schedule 1 narcotic tomorrow, I still have all the distribution. I still have all the pieces and parts. I would literally call my distributors and say, what's the hottest selling product right now? Give me a month to figure out how to manufacture for less money and be competitive in the market. Would you give me a shot? And our entire business unit would just pivot into that right away, which is why, going way back in time to early conversations with us, that's why I like to have so much operating capital in reserve. It's like, if all that happened, everybody would be fine. We just pivot, create a new product, and do the same thing again, because it's not directionally specific on the business vertical. We've got really, really intelligent businessmen and women that are supporting our growth now.
That's great. Okay. Well, for the sake of time, I want to tell people where they can find out more about you and where you want to point them. What do you think people should know? So
RyanNiddel.com, RyanNiddel.com. Same thing with every social media platform, or MIT45.com, right? Those are the two places to find me. I don't have something to sell. I mean, MIT45, you can buy our product, but I don't have a course or an offering. It's literally just a way for me to give back and share what I'm up to.
I love it, man. Well, I appreciate you carving out the time. You definitely got some good stuff to help people through their journeys.
Great. Thanks, Brad.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million: the podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.